dealing with the Triad, Atum Re, and Amun Re. And they were three scientists, geneticists, as far as like going from the Black Book. Dealing with Anun Re that you were just speaking upon, and you said it was a female
principle.
Okay, it's a female principle. Now,
Atun is also a female principle that would be the opposite as the sun would appear to rise and set.
okay.
Understand that too. So Atum and Amun would be the male principles.
Now, would Anun also be what would be the role of Anun as opposed to, the three scientists?
The role would be secret. That's the role of Anun. To keep that which is secret, sacred. And only those that understand the difference between that which is revealed and that which is concealed. Because what took place when Alelu went to risk? He tried to take over. But these beings, they welcomed him with open arms. They were in distress. And he saw that it became an empire. And this is the story. It trickles down later on into your heaven. But you just see heaven as this good place where the streets are covered with gold. The rivers flow with milk and honey. The Quran talks about it, right? But this is the mysterious, what heaven is all about. But it came from the true legends of what the Enuma Elish, the Etra Heseds, the Gilgamesh epics, these are the tablets of the Sumerian doctrines that spoke of this. Okay, so when he came there to Risk became an empire where other extraterrestrials came to and learned how to govern their societies. These were beings that when the Big Bang occurred, their planet where they resided in started to slow up and move the vibration, and they developed as the other portions that became the universe, dualverse, triverse, multiverse, omniverse, as it started to, slow up in its expansion, dealing with all expanding, Patarat. They started to learn the things that we're starting to learn now, but they were much older. So they had learned a point where whatever you put out in the universe, you're going to get back. So they learned it's not about attacking. It's not even about defending yourself. That's where the turn the other cheek doctrine comes from. It's not about being the aggressor, because that reverberation comes back and bites you. So they learned the ultimate peace, and other extraterrestrials came there to elevate, to take back what they learned from there to their planets and learn to live in that way. But in this particular case, you had Humbaba, we refer to as Tarnush, right? That he came there and saw, because he already ruled a variety of star systems, as the introduction to the Black Book explains. And he thought he could take over. But they had to go back and clone a being. I want to get back to your question. But they had to go back and clone a being. That being was Murdoch. They didn't even deal with physical fighting anymore. But they had to go back and clone somebody that was a warrior to be able to deal with that. But back to your question. With Anun Re, they did not want to get into that situation where they would give them certain principles. Because see, even on risk, Wunuwap is taught on no higher level by being referred to as Namlugalu. Namlugalu would incarnate from time to time into the body, the physical body of Malachi Kobina York to spread outformation. That's why he's always saying it's not coming from him, it's coming through him. All you got to do is just analyze the work that he's done for 40 years. Nobody's ever done that, and still doing it. And the greatest greatness of his purpose would be for you and I to be able to articulate that which he taught us. So Anun Re represents the secret. As I said earlier, a true master will allow you to say what you want to say, feel how you want to feel, because you don't know, mum's the word. So they kept all of those things in terms of how the universe was formed, what really took place, where are the sacred writings, where are these records kept. But what happens is every 24,000 years, which is a new cycle, those things must be revealed, such as the great secret that woman is God, not the man God. Man is not God. Woman is God. She becomes the mistress of darkness and is likened unto the womb. They know for a fact now through the Hubble telescope that the Big Bang did happen. Where's that in the Bible? You're not going to find it. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's this solar system. That's not the universe. How is the universe formed? Job tries to explain it, but it doesn't. That's why we're needed. So Anun Re represents the secret. Atum, Atun, and Amun as the three geneticists now, because they represent schools. They represent schools and to the principle of Wu-Nawap. That's what Anun Re would equal, Wu-Nawapu. Or when you're saying Atum, Wu-Nupu. That's a principle that has to be learned. That's what we're learning now. So people thought they had it figured out by the Holy Tablets. The Holy Tablets was a divine revelation, as divine as any other revelation that was sent down. But it gave us religion. It was supposed to be for the Hebrews so that they would come to read the Holy Tablets so that they wouldn't be stuck under the spell of ghostism, so you can ask a wonderfully interesting question that can be answered by the secret. Anun Re manifests with the word from Hu-He when the question is asked. From Atum, Atun, and Amun, which is 3 in 1, 1 in 3. So the Master Teacher represents Tum, or the incarnation of Tahuti Thoth, from Tum, the undifferentiated one, the point in darkness where the light begins to manifest, but you still can't differentiate things. Then on into where the sun is at its highest. All 3 in 1. So when you're saying Atum Re, you're saying Amun and Atun in Atum Re. The 3 points of the sun, the real Trinity from which it originated. So they would go out and teach, and then they established their schools, and then they had triads, they themselves. So you had the triad of Atum Re, you had the triad of Atun Re, the triad of Amun Re. And when Alexander the Greek, who they falsely called the Great, when he conquered Egypt, he set up his library that he claimed that was in Alexandria. Wasn't really named that, but he started naming those cities and those deities there after themselves. And it was in those libraries that they are able to learn those mysteries, but they never got to the secrets of Anun Re, the mystery of the woman that's in darkness. As the sperm hits the ovum in darkness, the same replica of the explosion that occurred millions upon millions, eons upon eons of existences, where it talks about Nun. That's the real creation story. That's the real portion that started the universe. You know, but that's it. Anything else?